If life is a one-way high-stakes gamble, then at 18 I didn't even have the chips to put on the table. I was an orphan, without father or mother, surviving on the meager relief from the welfare home and the little money I made from moonlighting writing code until I finished high school. That summer, when the teacher shoved the Harvard acceptance letter into my hand, his eyes sparkled with a brighter excitement than mine. "Jasper, you're the only one from our school in the past 10 years to get into Harvard. The school is helping you apply for social funding for tuition and living expenses. Don't you dare give up." I looked at that ornate paper, but inside I felt only dead silence. Any aid the school could obtain would be a drop in the ocean. The high cost of living in the big city and the continuous years of expenses for running data models afterward, for an orphan who didn't even have next month's rent figured out, was nothing more than a beautifully packaged mirage. "Teacher, I'm not going." I folded the acceptance letter neatly, slid it back into my backpack, and said it as calmly as one might say it's going to rain tomorrow. "I got an offer from an internet company in the city. I start next month. They provide meals and lodging, and the salary is $8,000 a month." The teacher slapped the table. "Are you out of your mind? $8,000 and you're selling off a genius's future. Do you know what your brain means to computer vision and algorithms? You're wasting a treasure." I smiled and said nothing. Genius doesn't fill your stomach. Under the weight of reality, calculus and godlike code can't buy a steaming bowl of braised pork. Just as I was about to pack my things and fully bow to fate that afternoon, she appeared in the welfare home's somewhat leaky reception room. It was Eloan. She was 21 then, wearing a well-tailored, perfectly unwrinkled white suit, her hair neatly pinned back, radiating a cool, noble air utterly out of place in this setting. She was the sole heir of the Song Corporation, already taking on major responsibilities within the group. That day, however, she was merely there as the head of the charity foundation to inspect the welfare home's funding projects. Somehow the teacher had learned of it and, with relentless insistence, shoved and dragged me in front of her. "Miss Eloan, this is the Jasper I mentioned. This boy is an absolute genius. He topped the science section in this year's college entrance exams, taught himself 4 programming languages, but because of his family situation." The teacher was sweating with anxiety. Eloan lifted her eyes slightly. Those clear, autumn water eyes, though, carried a hint of scrutiny as they fell on me. I nervously fiddled with the frayed edge of my faded jeans, tilting my chin up a little and meeting her gaze with the last of my pride. I hate supplicating. If there was even the slightest trace of pity or charity in her look, I would turn and walk away at once. However, she didn't. She simply took a thick printed packet from the assistant, a paper I had previously published in the open source community about a novel compression algorithm. "This paper is yours." Her voice was pleasant to listen to, like textured shards of jade, cool yet clean. "Yes," I replied. "On page 3, line 6, the logical closed loop, how did you derive that purely by mental calculation without the support of high compute servers?" She struck at the core. I froze for a moment, then felt an excitement at being understood by a kindred spirit and blurted out, "I borrowed the VRAM from that old hulking computer in the welfare home and wrote an extremely stripped-down microkernel, distributing the computational load across." I spoke for 10 minutes straight, gesturing and drawing in the air, completely forgetting that the woman in front of me was the heir to a multi-billion-dollar conglomerate. Eloan listened quietly the whole time, occasionally nodding slightly, a very faint yet irresistibly beautiful curve appearing at the corner of her mouth. When I finished, my mouth dry and tongue-tired, she closed the dossier, turned to the assistant behind her and said, "Cancel this year's sponsorship for that art exhibition and move all the funds into Jasper's private education fund. Not just his 4 years of university tuition and living expenses, but every piece of hardware he needs for research, server bandwidth. Song Corporation will cover it all." I froze in place, as if a giant pie had struck my head. I could even hear my own heart pounding wildly. "Miss Eloan, Eloan stood up and walked to me. She was half a head shorter than I was, but the aura of a corporate powerhouse made me straighten instinctively. She reached out her pale, delicate hand and looked at me seriously. "Jasper, this is not charity, it's an investment. I believe in your mind. In business terms, I'll give you the best research environment. In return, you must produce work during college that can truly change the industry. Understand?" I looked at that hand, took a deep breath, and gripped it hard. The youth's palm was slick with sweat, while hers felt slightly cool. "Miss Eloan, I promise you, I will be the most profitable investment you ever make. I will study diligently and repay you." That was the beginning of our story. That year, she was 21, just starting to make her mark in the business world. I was 18, secretly carving her name into my heart. During my 4 years at university, I lived like a wound-up, heartless research machine. While my roommates were gaming online or playing guitar on the quad to chase girls, I was either pulling all-nighters in the lab running data or gnawing through obscure foreign monographs in the library. Whenever I felt exhausted, my eyes burning until I could barely keep them open, I would take out my phone and open the official news about the Song Corporation. Eloan on the screen grew ever more dazzling. She had officially taken the post of executive president of the Song Corporation, ruthlessly reorganized several loss-making subsidiaries, and was hailed by the media as the toughest, most iron-fisted business empress in City A. She rarely reached out to me first, aside from the immovable ritual each semester of reviewing my transcripts and research reports. And the answers I always gave her were nothing but straight A's and multiple papers topping the world's leading journals. The summer of my senior year, the Tianyan visual recognition algorithm my team and I developed cut through every hurdle and stormed into the finals of the International Computer Vision Competition. On the night of the finals, we stayed up for 20 straight hours in the Silicon Valley venue, and in the final evaluation we won the global championship with an absolute lead of nearly 10 percentage points over the runner-up. The hall erupted in applause, my teammates gleefully tossed me into the air. Amid the confetti and cheers, the first thought that came to my mind was, "Eloan, I finally have the ticket that lets me walk up to you with my head held high." I booked the earliest flight home. When I landed in City A it was 3 in the afternoon and the sun was blinding. I clutched the heavy gold trophy to my chest, hadn't even changed my clothes, and took a cab straight to the Song Corporation headquarters. I wanted to tell her the news myself, I wanted to see that approving look in her eyes. Even the secret, shameful little fantasy I had harbored for 4 years began to stir under the halo of this championship. Yet fate always seems to enjoy delivering a brutal slap when a person is at the height of their pride. When the taxi was less than 2 kilometers from Song Corporation at an intersection, a sudden screech of brakes pierced the air ahead, followed by the deafening crash of twisting metal. An out-of-control heavy truck had broadside a black Mercedes Maybach. The Maybach flipped through the air, slammed into the median, its body instantly mangled, and the window glass shattered everywhere. My God, this crash is terrible. That Maybach's license plate. I think it's the Song family's, right? The taxi driver craned his neck and sighed. The moment I heard the Song family, my mind went completely blank. I yanked open the car door, didn't even notice the trophy clattering at my feet, and bolted toward the crash scene like a madwoman. A crowd had already gathered, some people were screaming, others were calling the police. I pushed through them and rushed to the mangled car door. Through the shattered windshield I saw Eloan collapsed against the airbag, her face soaked in blood. In that instant, every notion of rank, every line between investor and beneficiary, everything flew out of my head. My heart seemed to stop as I used every ounce of strength to pry the deformed car door open. The jagged metal sliced my palm, blood pouring out, but I couldn't feel any pain. Someone! Help! Rescue! I roared like a beast. A few kind passers-by rushed over, and together we heaved the door open at last. Carefully, I lifted Eloan, covered in blood and already unconscious, out of the car. The moment I picked her up, she was as light as a fallen leaf. The business queen who had always stood above everyone now felt so fragile she might shatter at any second. "Don't be afraid, Eloan, I'm here." My voice trembled beyond control as I held her and ran, flagging down a passing private car and racing toward the nearest hospital. Outside the operating room, the red light stabbed at my eyes. I sat on a bench, drenched in blood, hers and my own. My hands trembled without stopping, and I prayed to the heavens over and over, as long as she survived, even if it meant trading my life for hers, I would have no regrets. 3 hours later, the operating room light finally went out. The doctor came out, exhausted, loosening his mask. I lunged forward. "Doctor, how is she?" "Her life is saved, her internal organs are largely unharmed, mainly a mild concussion and severe lacerations to the face from the glass. However, the doctor sighed. Because the brain sustained a violent impact, it compressed the optic nerves. After waking, the patient may experience temporary blindness. As for when vision will return, that will depend on how the subsequent hematoma resolves. Temporary blindness. The words were like a nail, driven hard into my heart. How despairing would proud, control-freak Eloan be if she knew she couldn't see? When I was allowed into the ward, Eloan had only just woken. Thick bandages wrapped her head, and the eyes that used to shine with lively light were now tightly covered by strips of white gauze. She lay quietly on the hospital bed, hands gripping the sheets so tightly that veins stood out on the backs of them, betraying the extreme unrest within her. "Who is it?" Hearing the door, she turned her head warily, her voice dry but still carrying its habitual chill. "Eloan, it's me, Jasper." I padded to the bedside and said softly. At the sound of my voice, her taut body seemed to loosen just a fraction, then immediately resumed that mask of indifference. "Jasper. Weren't you away competing abroad? What are you doing here?" "I won the championship, and I swallowed, cutting the second half of the sentence off. "The doctor says your eyes only suffered a temporary injury, you'll get better soon. Don't worry, I'll stay with you during this time." Eloan was silent for a moment, a bitter, self-mocking smile tugging at the corner of her mouth. "Temporary blindness. I get it. Song Corporation has a pile of projects waiting for my signature, and I go and turn blind at a time like this. How ironic. With me here, whatever you want to see, I'll see for you." I couldn't help but take her cold hand. This time, she didn't pull away. Just as the atmosphere in the ward grew a bit heavy, the attending physician came in and recommended taking Eloan down to the imaging department for a detailed fundus angiography to further determine the extent of the compression on her optic nerves. I carefully helped Eloan into the wheelchair. Because she couldn't see, her body was a bit rigid, her hands gripping the armrests tightly. "Eloan, relax. I'm pushing you, there's no obstacle ahead," I soothed her softly. I pushed her in the elevator down to the third floor, the combined obstetrics and imaging area. The hospital's layout was unusual, the two departments shared the same waiting hall. People came and went, everywhere filled with pregnant women and their families. Just as we passed the VIP consult room of the obstetrics department, a familiar voice, which filled me with disgust, suddenly drifted over from nearby. "Baby, go slow. The doctor said the first 3 months are the risky period. You must protect our little one from me." That voice. I turned my head instinctively. Not far away, a man in a tailored suit, dressed to the nines, was carefully supporting a woman in a maternity dress whose belly was already slightly rounded. The man's hand wandered greedily over her butt, his face full of ingratiating smiles and lascivious grins. Vincent. Eloan's fiancé, the second son of the Shen family of City A. The two families were joined by a business marriage. This was no secret in our circles. Vincent usually put on a look of deep devotion in public, always doting on Eloan, but I never expected him to be this disgusting behind closed doors. "Vincent, when are you dumping that Eloan? Her belly's getting bigger and bigger, you can't have the kid born and be a bastard, can you?" the woman cooed. Soon, soon. That woman is a joyless workaholic, always with that cold face, won't even let me touch her. If it weren't for the Song family shares, I wouldn't bother putting up with her. Once I transfer this project I'm handling, I'll kick her to the curb. Vincent spat viciously. A hot surge of blood rushed to my head and my fists clenched until they ached. I was about to lunge forward and beat that scumbag senseless when a sudden cool touch came from the wheelchair. Eloan clutched my wrist hard. She was astonishingly strong, her nails almost dug into my flesh. "Jasper." She tilted her head up slightly, though a gauze separated us. I could feel the bone-deep cold radiating from her. "The one who spoke just now, was that Vincent?" "Yes." I ground out the answer through my teeth. "Was there a woman with him? How big is her belly?" Eloan's voice was frighteningly calm, like a finely tuned machine in motion, yet the tremor in her tone betrayed the tempest raging inside her. "It looks like about 4 or 5 months. Vincent called her a baby, and mentioned a child, breaking the engagement, and shares in the song company, I answered truthfully. Good, very good. Eloan drew a deep breath. Even faced with such betrayal, this business queen still made the most rational decision in an instant. Jasper, listen. I'm blind now, you are my eyes. Take out your phone and photograph their intimate moments, record audio, keep it as evidence. I want high definition, enough to see their faces clearly. Understood. I pulled out my phone, set it to the highest quality, and started snapping furiously at the oblivious pair nearby, while also recording Vincent's sickening sweet talk to the woman in crystal clear audio. As a top computer expert, taking surreptitious photos with a phone was child's play. I even used the lobby's mirrored reflections to capture several excellent angles. Got it? Eloan asked softly. All of it, every micro-expression is crystal clear. Take me to the dean's office. The Song family is the hospital's largest sponsor. I want every medical record and payment statement showing that woman and Vincent were here, and I want them in 5 minutes. Eloan ordered coldly. 5 minutes later, the director's office. Under the pressure of the Song family's corporate privileges, a printed report lay on the desk. Miss Eloan, we found her. This woman is called Chloe, 20 weeks pregnant. All her prenatal checkup payments were made with Mr. Vincent's supplementary card. Also, Mr. Vincent has reserved a top-tier luxury maternity suite for her in this hospital. The director reported tremblingly. Eloan sat on the sofa, hands folded on her knees, her entire demeanor icy and impassive. Jasper, notify Vincent. Tell him to come to the VIP ward on the top floor immediately. Say. I was in a car accident and I'm dying. Eloan spoke each word deliberately. 10 minutes later, the VIP ward on the top floor. Vincent barreled in, tumbling and scrambling, a feigned anxiety and concern plastered across his face. Eloan. Eloan, are you all right? I heard you were in a car accident. I was terrified. What happened to your eyes? He called out as he made a move to lunge forward and grab Eloan's hand. I stepped in at an angle, solid as a wall, firmly blocking the bedside, my gaze icy as I looked at him. Mr. Vincent, please keep your distance. Who are you? A mere caregiver daring to stop me. Get out of the way. Vincent snarled. Eloan leaned against the headboard and spoke slowly. Jasper, show him the stuff. I let out a cold snort, opened the video on my phone, and casually slammed the printed prenatal report into Vincent's face. In the video, Vincent was lecherously groping the pregnant woman's butt, bragging about kicking Eloan out with grandiose threats. Coupled with the clearly itemized payment receipt, it stripped him bare down to his underwear. Vincent's face shifted from red to white in an instant, then from white to green, as if painted on a palette. Eloan, listen to me. This is all a misunderstanding. That woman was forcing herself on me, the child isn't mine. Vincent panicked. If the Song family's arranged marriage fell through, he would be completely powerless in the Shen clan. Vincent, 2 minutes ago, Song Corporation's legal department issued an official letter to the Shen group. In light of your unilateral breach of the prenuptial agreement, moral turpitude, and involvement in commercial fraud, the engagement between our families is hereby terminated immediately. Additionally, the 3 joint projects currently being advanced by the Shen side and controlled by Song will be indefinitely and fully divested with immediate effect. Eloan's voice had not a trace of fluctuation, as if pronouncing the death sentence of someone insignificant. A full divestment. It was nothing less than a death blow to Vincent. Seeing his deception mercilessly exposed, Vincent gave up pretending. He tore off his mask of hypocrisy and, pointing at Eloan, ranted hysterically, Eloan. What act of purity are you putting on? We've been engaged 2 years and you won't even let me hold your hand. You're always in meetings or looking over reports. I'm marrying a wife, not a cold, money-making machine. What man could stand a woman like you? What's wrong with me going out to see other women? I'm a normal man too. Isn't it because you absolutely refused to let me touch you that I couldn't hold back and made a mistake? Can you put all the blame on me? His words grew harsher and harsher, echoing through the ward, each syllable like a blade. Eloan's hand, hidden beneath the covers, clenched into a tight fist, her body trembling slightly from the intensity of anger and humiliation. "You asked for it." I could no longer hold back the fury inside me. Just as Vincent was about to continue barking, I sprang forward, grabbed the lapel of his suit, and with one hand hauled him up off the floor. A year of senior year workouts and a genius's precise force unleashed an astonishing strength in me at that moment. What are you trying to do? I'm the second young master of the Shen family. How dare you touch me? Fuck you, second young master. I slammed my fist hard into Vincent's face, ravaged by excess. Crack. The sound of a broken nasal bone. Vincent screamed as his whole body flew backward, slamming into the ward wall and then sliding down like a lump of rotten mud. He clutched his blood-soaked nose and wailed in pain on the floor. "Jasper, stop." Elowen suddenly spoke. I forced myself to halt the kick I was about to deliver and turned to look at her. "Don't dirty your hands. Let him crawl away." Elowen waved wearily. I dragged Vincent to the ward door like taking out the trash, looking down at him from above. "If I hear you call Elowen one more filthy name, I swear I'll make sure you spend the rest of your life bedridden and unable to get up. Get out." Vincent scrambled away in a terrified, humiliated rush. The ward door shut, the noise faded. The room fell into a deathly silence. Elowen leaned against the headboard, suddenly sagging with exhaustion, her shoulders beginning to heave violently. The iron-hearted queen who could do anything in the business world and had just torn apart a marriage alliance with her bare hands finally let down every guard and, in the solitude, gave out a suppressed, agonized sob. A fiancé's betrayal, loss of sight, calculations of gain and loss, all the pressures crashed down on her in that instant like an avalanche. Watching her frail, solitary figure, my heart felt as if it were being cut by a knife. I went to the bedside and slowly crouched down, making no exaggerated movements, only gently enclosing her cold, trembling hand in my palm. I looked at her, though she could not see, and my gaze was full of an all-or-nothing tenderness. "Elowen, you did nothing wrong. He is the one who doesn't deserve you. You gave me a future, now let me be your eyes. Until your sight returns, no matter what happens, I will not leave you. I will stay right here." In truth, it wasn't only these recent days. How I wanted to tell her, back in that summer when I was 18 and so poor I didn't even dare open the acceptance letter, she was already my deity. I am a humble orphan, I know my current status, standing, and worth are worlds apart from hers. I don't deserve her. So I was willing to bury this love, so intense it threatened to spill over, deep in the darkest corner of my heart. As long as I could stay by her side, that was enough. Elowen said nothing, she simply turned her hand and gripped mine tightly, as if clutching the only piece of driftwood on a stormy sea. 2 weeks later, Elowen was discharged. Although the intracranial hematoma was gradually subsiding, her vision still hadn't returned, she could only barely make out faint, blurry shapes of light. In the doctor's words, this was a hysterical and organic mixed blindness, which would require a positive mindset and careful, attentive care to recover slowly. At Song Group, Elowen simply took the opportunity to give herself a long vacation, handing day-to-day affairs to a trusted vice president and moving back to a private villa in the suburbs to recuperate. And I, as was only natural, became her full-time personal attendant and human guide dog. On the first day after moving into the villa, I faced the biggest professional challenge of my life. "Jasper, I want to take a bath." Elowen sat on the living room sofa and said to the air with an expressionless face. I was in the kitchen experimenting with a nutritious recipe when my hand jerked and I almost sent the kitchen knife flying. I hurried out and swallowed hard. "Elowen, men and women shouldn't have that kind of contact. How about I hire you a professional, top-notch female caregiver?" "No, I don't want someone clumsy," Elowen refused briskly. "And in my current state, I don't want strangers to see me." "Didn't you say you'd repay me?" "What, you won't even let me draw you a bath?" I will. I'd go through fire and brimstone for you." I wiped the cold sweat from my brow and stumbled into the bathroom. I set the water temperature, prepared the bathtub, and smoothed the non-slip mat perfectly before I finally stepped back out. Like a guide for the blind, I took a clean towel and had Elowen hold one end, carefully leading her into the bathroom. Eloan, the bathtub is 3 steps straight ahead of you. Your nightgown is on the rack to the left. I'll be right outside the door, call me if you need anything and I'll barge in for you, no, enter as needed. I stammered. Through the gauze, I could almost see Eloan lift an eyebrow. Jasper, are you nervous? She tilted her head slightly. No. Absolutely not. I'm an algorithm guy, my heart rate's been steady at 60 for years, now, maybe it's just a little system overload, about 130. I forced a few nervous laughs and hurriedly shut the door and slipped out. Leaning against the wall outside the bathroom, listening to the sibilant rush of water from within, my brain began to rebel and spin wildly. Those images of her perfect figure replayed across my mind like a barrage of comments on a live stream. Don't look if it's improper, don't think improper thoughts. Jasper, you're here to repay a debt, not to be a pervert. You're bringing shame on Harvard. I muttered under my breath as I raised my hand and slapped myself hard across the face. Jasper. Are you out there swatting mosquitoes? Eloan's voice came from inside, laced with a hint of amusement. Ah, yeah, the mosquitoes in this villa are pretty big, they even clap their own hands, I lied through my teeth. To get Eloan out of the gloom sooner, I leaned on my hard science sense of humor and tried every trick in the book to make her laugh. At dinner, I carved a carrot into an extremely abstract shape and put it in her bowl. Jasper, what is this? It's so hard. She prodded it with her fork. This is the perfect geometric carrot I derived using my latest algorithm. According to mechanics and nutrition science, a carrot cut at this angle preserves the maximum amount of vitamin C. And when you chew it, it emits a perfect 440 Hz pure tone, it's like eating a symphony. I said, deadpan, making it all up. Eloan picked it up and bit down, crunch. Jasper, stop lying to me. Isn't this just a badly cut triangular carrot? A small smile tugged at the corner of her mouth. Seeing her smile, I felt sweeter than if I'd won the world championship. Eloan, the weather's nice today. I'll take you out to the yard to sunbathe. And while we're at it, I'll tell you a hardcore romantic line from a science student. I pushed her into the garden. Go on, let's hear your high-minded opinion. She leaned back on the chaise lounge, sunlight spilling over her pale face. Physicists say the most passionate declaration in the world isn't "I love you," but "You are my black hole." I waved my arms as I spoke, and the air fell silent in an instant. Eloan turned to me without expression. Where's the joke? Don't black holes swallow and tear everything apart? How is that deep feeling? Ah, because according to general relativity, a black hole's gravity is infinite, not even light can escape. I mean, once the gravitational collapse falls into your world, not even faster than light travel in this life could get me away, I'd be stuck forever at the singularity. I explained weakly. Eloan was silent for 3 seconds, then suddenly let out a soft laugh. The smile was like ice and snow melting in early spring, so beautiful it took one's breath away. Jasper, you really are a bona fide dork. But, you're kind of fun. Looking at her smile, I was momentarily dazed. In these days spent together from dawn to dusk, the formidable, decisive Mr. Song from the business world gradually faded. In his place appeared a real girl who sometimes acted coy, who lit up at sweets, who smiled at a silly joke. And Eloan, in this wholly quiet stretch of time, began to view the young men who had quietly guarded her with an entirely new perspective. He wasn't just brilliant, able to help her finish the backlog of financial statements with voice-assisted blind review in minutes, picking out the logical gaps. He was also meticulous to the extreme. Every sharp corner in the villa was wrapped in soft bumper guards, and the water she habitually drank was always kept at the perfect temperature of 37.5 degrees. More importantly, whenever she woke from a nightmare in the middle of the night and called, Jasper, that tall figure would always appear outside the door within 10 seconds, his voice gentle and steady, Eloan, I'm here. Love had no discernible origin but ran deep and unshakable. Yet one of them, held back by insecurity and clutching at gratitude as a defense, dared not cross the line. The other waited in the dark, quietly, for the day that defense would finally collapse. The turning point came in the 4th week after we moved into the villa. That morning, as usual, I carried the special nourishing millet porridge into Eloan's bedroom. "Eloan, get up and eat, Before I could finish the sentence, my gaze fell upon the bed and I froze in place as if someone had cast a paralysis spell on me. At some point Eloan had swapped the large bandage over her eyes for a thin black silk ribbon. She was propped against the headboard, wearing an exceedingly smooth silk camisole nightgown. As she shifted, one shoulder strap obediently slipped down off her rounded shoulder, revealing a large expanse of skin as pale and fine as mutton-fat jade. Her collarbone was delicate, an alluring, picturesque sight. The most fatal thing was that her eyes were staring at me with no focus, her voice carrying a trace of just-woken hoarseness and laziness. "Jasper. You're in. Could you grab the moisturizer on the bedside table for me? My legs feel a bit dry." I swallowed hard, feeling a rush of heat flood my sinuses, wishing I could crawl into a crack in the earth. What I didn't know was that at this very moment, beneath that seemingly sturdy black ribbon, Eloan's eyes had fully recovered on the night 3 days ago. When she opened her eyes and saw this colorful world again, the first thing she noticed was Jasper, who had stayed by her bedside all night, with dark circles under his eyes, sleeping like a big bear. Seeing his delicate face, exhausted down to every line, the softest part of Eloan's heart was completely struck. She realized she had fallen, helplessly, for this boy 3 years her junior. But this business queen soon discovered a fact that left her equal parts amused and exasperated. Jasper, that dork, clearly loved her to the bone. Whenever he looked at her his eyes burned as if on fire, yet the moment anything resembling a real emotional expression came up, he instantly transformed into a paragon of propriety and an innocent virgin, stubbornly boxing himself in with the roles of benefactor and beneficiary. "If you won't make the first move, then I'll have to bait you myself." That was Eloan's true thought at that moment. "Jasper. Why are you silent? Where are you?" Eloan tilted her head on purpose and tugged another inch of the slipping strap down, putting on an expression of bewildered fragility. "Here. I'm here." I took a deep breath, shut my eyes, and groped to the bedside table from memory, grabbing the bottle of moisturizer. "Eloan, here." I handed the bottle over with my eyes closed. A warm, delicate little hand didn't reach for the bottle but instead found my wrist with unerring accuracy and gave a gentle tug. Caught completely off guard, I lost my balance and pitched forward. To keep from falling on her, I instinctively braced my hands on the mattress. When I opened my eyes, the distance between Eloan and me was less than 5 centimeters. I could even smell the faint scent of gardenias on her, could see the delicate texture of her lips. Her eyes, hidden beneath the ribbon, stared at me now in bewilderment. "Jasper, you're very close to me." She breathed like an orchid, leaning forward slightly. The view at her chest was all but undeniable. At that moment my reason sounded the alarm like mad. Core collapse. Defense systems breached on all fronts. "Jasper, calm down. You are a gentleman." "Eloan, men and women shouldn't touch like this. I'll get up first." My face flushed bright red as I made a move to step back. "Don't move." Eloan's voice suddenly dropped, carrying a plaintive note that was hard to refuse. My eyes hurt. "Could you blow on them for me?" "Blow?" I stared at her face, so close, exquisitely beautiful yet tinged with a fragile pleading, and some string inside me snapped completely. Compelled by some impulse, I leaned in and, with the silk ribbon still between us, blew softly toward her eyes. "Who?" A faint breath brushed past. Eloan shivered slightly, and somehow her hands had already found their way to my neck. In that instant the air between us was so charged with ambiguity it felt like it might drip. My gaze fell on her rosy lips, and a frantic voice roared in my head, "Kiss her. She belongs to you now. Tell her you like her." Our breaths were completely entwined. My lips were only a centimeter from hers, just a little closer and I could taste that sweet, forbidden zone. Suddenly, a memory from the summer I was 18 flashed through my mind, the words she said to me at the welfare home. "Jasper, this isn't charity, this is an investment. I saw potential in your mind." And Vincent's venomous curse, "Which man do you think can stand a cold, money-making machine like you? No. I can't take advantage of her at a time like this. She's at a low point, blind, and has just been betrayed by her fiancé. Mentally she is most fragile. If I were to exploit her now and confess my feelings, how would I be any different from that opportunistic Vincent who looted in the chaos? I do like her, but I respect her more. I want to be the man who stands beside her, not a speculator who moves in on weakness. With that thought I bit my tongue hard, the intense pain snapped my reason back in an instant. I summoned all the willpower I had left, and gently but firmly removed Eloan's hands from my neck, straightened up, and took a large step back. Eloan, the porridge is getting cold. You eat first. I'll go check the kitchen for any other dishes. After saying it, I looked exactly like an innocent virgin who'd just been teased by a female ruffian. I turned and fled in a panic, moving so fast I almost left an afterimage in the air. On the sickbed, Eloan ripped the black ribbon from her eyes. Those clear, proud eyes, now full of amusement and resignation, showed not the slightest hint of blindness. Staring at the closed bedroom door, Eloan finally couldn't help but press the pillow to her face and giggle. Jasper, oh Jasper, you really are a super-duper big fool. I paved the way right up to your mouth, and you still insist on sticking to your principles. But after laughing, a determined softness flashed in her eyes. Fine, since you want to play the innocent, high school guy who defends his boundaries act, then don't blame the CEO for launching an all-out assault. Let's see how long you can hold out. The next few days my life turned into a grueling trial by fire. Eloan seemed to have unleashed some demonic facet of her nature, unleashing one high-level flirtation tactic after another. For example, sitting in the study in the afternoon to look over the financials was really just an excuse to listen to me read the reports aloud. Jasper, I'm a bit cold. Eloan hunched her shoulders. Then I'll turn the AC up 2 degrees. I made a move as if to take the remote. No, the air conditioning dries out my skin. Come here, hug me, you're warm. She stretched out her arms toward me with righteous certainty. Another example, watching TV in the living room at night is really just for the noise. Jasper, the sound effects in this horror movie are kind of scary. I'm frightened. Eloan burrowed directly into my arms, her head pressed hard against my chest. Listening to the heartbeat in my own chest that felt like it might shatter my ribs, I stiffened like a freshly unearthed terracotta warrior, my hands raised high with nowhere to rest. Eloan, if you're scared we can switch to the news. That usually isn't frightening and it promotes positive values. Eloan rolled her eyes at me in my arms and gave my waist a hard pinch. I sucked in a sharp breath from the pain but didn't let out a sound. At last, a hunter's patience has its limits. After probing for a week straight, and with me stubbornly holding my ground like an old dog on the final step, Eloan decided to flip the table and lay her cards on the table. That evening, a torrential rain started outside. Thunder roared and lightning occasionally slit the night sky. I had prepared a tableful of sumptuous dinner and was about to call for Eloan when I noticed the living room light was off, the room plunged in dimness. Eloan sat alone before the wide floor-to-ceiling window, a glass of red wine in her hand, quietly watching the rain outside. Wait. Watching the rain outside. My heart lurched, suddenly something clicked. I tiptoed over, making not a sound. When I was still 3 steps away from her, Eloan didn't turn her head, yet spoke with unfailing accuracy. Jasper, the rain's pretty heavy tonight. Look at that lightning, doesn't it look like that triangular carrot you carved that day? I froze in place. My brain raced at billions of calculations per second and, at last, arrived at a startling conclusion. Eloan, your eyes. Eloan slowly turned her head and set down her glass. Those eyes, startlingly bright in the dark, held a hint of mischief, a touch of teasing, and an intensity of feeling so full it seemed about to spill over, fixed on me unblinkingly. My eyes have been perfectly fine for a week. She rose and walked toward me, step by step. Then these past few days you've been, I took an instinctive step back. I'm not pretending to be blind, how else could I have seen you, this brilliant dummy, sweating like a furnace every day over that pathetic scrap of pride and principle? Eloan drove me into a corner, cutting off every route of escape. In that instant, offense and defense completely reversed. She was no longer the fragile patient I needed to look after, she was the one in control of everything, a queen on her high throne. Jasper, do you think I don't like you? She reached out and planted her hand against the wall by my ear, giving me a solid cabotin. You think you're an orphan with nothing, unworthy of me. You think because I supported you financially, your feelings for me must be ingratitude and betrayal, right? Eloan's words struck at my heart. She peeled away the deepest layers of my insecurity and worry. I kept my head down, dared not meet her eyes, and bit my teeth hard. But Jasper, you listen to me. Eloan suddenly raised her other hand and forced my chin up, making me look at her. A merchant only sees profit. When I backed you, it was indeed an investment. But I didn't tell you that the expected final return on that investment was to lose myself completely. I was utterly stunned, staring at her like a fool. I like you. Not because you won some world championship, nor because you're good at taking care of me. But because you're Jasper, the Jasper who had the nerve to provoke me with his brain at 18, the Jasper who at 22 dared to fight the Shen family for me. Eloan's eyes were slightly red, but her voice was unshakably firm. I've already taken the initiative this far. If you're still a man, then smash that damned pride to pieces. Now answer me, do you like me or not? At that moment, thunder outside exploded with a roar. Looking at the woman before me who had cast aside all pride and laid her true heart bare for me, if I shrank back now, I would be a coward through and through. Screw the class differences. Screw the chasm between us. The restraint and patience I'd held onto shattered in that instant, replaced by 4 years' worth of love exploding wildly. I like you. Eloan, I love you so much I'm going insane. I swept my arm around her slender waist and hauled her hard into my embrace, using every ounce of my strength. Under Eloan's astonished yet delighted gaze, I didn't hesitate. I bowed my head and fiercely kissed the lips I had coveted for countless days and nights. This kiss lacked the previous gentleness and restraint. There was something savage, something mad, and an outpouring of possessiveness. Eloan froze for a moment, then answered with equal ardor. Her hands clung tightly to my neck, letting me storm and conquer her mouth. Rain hammered against the windows, and in this cramped corner, two souls finally broke all their chains and entangled themselves in a furious embrace. After a long while, I reluctantly left her lips. Eloan panted against my chest, cheeks flushed, eyes full of tender affection. You brute, you were so rough just now, you almost choked me. I looked at her lips, a little swollen from my kisses, and sheepishly scratched my head. I took a deep breath, placed my hands on her shoulders, and looked at her seriously. Even though I'm holding you right now, I keep my promises. Apart from a world champion title and a head full of algorithms, I have nothing in terms of business assets. I don't want people saying you married a man who lives off a woman, and I especially don't want your parents to lose face in their circles. Eloan raised an eyebrow. What, planning to seduce me and then abandon me? No. I hurriedly shook my head, my eyes flashing with unprecedented confidence and edge. Give me 3 years. No, not even 3 years. Within 3 years I'll fully commercialize and deploy the Tianyan algorithm I have. I'm going to start my own tech company. 3 years from now, I'll come to you and your parents with capital that can stand toe-to-toe with the songs, and I'll propose to you in full glory. Eloan watched me quietly. In that moment, she saw in me the exact same ambition and self-assurance she had once had. This was the kind of man she wanted, a fledgling eagle destined to soar into the heavens, not a canary content to nestle in a greenhouse. All right. Eloan laughed graciously, reached out and tidied my slightly disheveled collar, and with all the dignity of a queen announced, I'll give you 3 years. During those 3 years, you're allowed to be my unofficial boyfriend with a license. But Jasper, you better work hard, my suitors queue from City A all the way to France. If you fall behind, I might replace you at any time. Don't worry. My algorithms are the best in the world, and my speed at chasing a wife is absolutely #1 too. I grinned, flashing a row of bright white teeth, picked her up again, and spun around a few excited times in the living room. Hey! Put me down. Jasper, you idiot, dinner's going to get cold. If it gets cold, it gets cold. Tonight. I want to eat something else. Ugh. Scoundrel. The rain outside gradually ceased, the dark clouds dispersed, and a clear, bright moon quietly climbed the treetops. I knew that the era that belonged to me was only just beginning. And that God who had once been beyond reach now, truly and really, lay in my arms, accompanying me as I set out to conquer the world. Promises are one thing, actually following through is another. Since I made things official with Eloan, I instantly upgraded from a full-time personal protector to an underground, licensed but not public boyfriend. Although nominally not public, paper can't keep a fire covered, especially given Eloan's recent demeanor at the company's senior management meetings. I heard the CEO's secretary sneaking complaints to me. When the old Eloan attended meetings, it was like a Siberian cold front had rolled through, every executive shivering in fear. But the recent Eloan, staring at her phone as she handled the dimensionality reduction algorithm optimization plan I sent her, would inexplicably curl the corners of her mouth 15 degrees. She'd become all gentle spring rain, frightening the executives into thinking the group was about to launch massive layoffs, everyone feelingly threatened. In the end, Eloan's parents couldn't sit still. The weekend my SkyEye Visuals tech company just closed its first multi-million angel round, Eloan handed me a bespoke suit. "Jasper, come home with me for dinner tonight." She fussed with my tie as she spoke, casually. "My parents want to meet the prodigy who beat Vincent into a bloody pulp and carried me out of that car wreck." My whole body tensed, I felt my CPU spike to a full 100% load. "Tonight? Eloan, isn't it a bit inappropriate for me to go in my current capacity?" Eloan tapped my chest lightly, her eyes full of amusement. "Don't worry, my dad isn't some monstrous tyrant, he's just an old fox who's retired." An hour later, at the Song family's old residence. The atmosphere at the dining table was far stranger than I had imagined. Eloan's mother was an exceptionally elegant woman. The moment she saw me she smiled and served me food, and the warmth in her eyes, the kind a mother-in-law feels for a son-in-law, growing more delighted the longer she looks, almost melted me on the spot. However, seated in the main chair, the former helmsman of Song Corporation, Terrence, wore a solemn expression. He sipped his soup leisurely, those eyes that had weathered decades in the business world occasionally sharpening into blades, scraping back and forth over me. "Jasper." Father Song finally put down his spoon and spoke. "Uncle, you were going to say." I straightened up immediately, like a defense candidate awaiting questioning. "Eloan supported you back then because of your mind. You certainly didn't disappoint her, taking the world championship, now starting your own business, and riding a strong tide of success." Eloan's father lit a cigar but didn't smoke it, letting the smoke curl around him. "But my daughter doesn't need to find a mobile calculator who only knows how to code." Although the Shen family produced a scoundrel, the Shen conglomerate's business map and connections are exactly what the Song family needs. "Tell me, on what grounds do you think you can replace them?" The atmosphere instantly dropped to freezing point. Eloan frowned and was about to speak up in her defense, but I gently squeezed her hand under the table, signaling that I would take over. Facing the pressure of this business tycoon, I took a deep breath, the proud, genius core in my bones fully awakened at that moment. "Uncle, what Shen brings to Song is an exchange of stock resources, but such an exchange has a ceiling and carries enormous moral risk. Vincent is the best example." I looked straight into Eloan's father's eyes, my voice steady and strong. "What I can bring to Eloan and to the Song family is an increment for an entire era. My SkyEye algorithm will be integrated into the National Smart City project next month. In the next 3 years, the autonomous driving and industrial automation vision systems derived from this algorithm will create a trillion-level blue ocean. I'm not here to replace the Shen company. I'm preparing to build, within 3 years, a brand new tech empire that surpasses Shen in scale, and then present it to you both as a betrothal gift, with my own hands." I paused, slipping in a touch of the hardcore humor typical of a science major. "Also, Uncle, from the standpoint of human genetics, the dominant inheritance probability for high intelligence is far more stable than that wasteful Vincent gene line of the Shen family. For Eloan's future happiness and the intellectual baseline of the Song family's next generation, investing in me is the most cost-effective deal the Song family can make." Chuckle. Eloan's mother couldn't help covering her mouth with her handkerchief, laughing so she seemed about to blossom. Eloan looked at me with a half-smile, half-amused expression. Eloan's father stared at me for a full minute, that taut, severe old face finally cracked like ice and he burst into hearty laughter. "What a best value deal. Your tongue is even sharper than your algorithms. Eloan's father shook his head with a smile, his eyes full of approval. If the original Turing test had been given to you, artificial intelligence would have already ruled the world. All right, a 3-year bet, then. I'll see whether you can really stir up a towering wave in this trillion-level blue ocean. After meeting the parents and obtaining the entry permit, my entrepreneurial path surged into overdrive. I had to admit, the business world was far more treacherous than even the most intricate code. Just as the company was getting on track and preparing to enter the smart home visual chip market, we were hit with a maliciously fabricated, patent troll lawsuit by rivals. They allied with several established firms and used protracted legal procedures to try to strangle our startup's cash flow. For that fortnight, my team and I pulled 7 all-nighters in the office, beards unshaven, eyes rimmed with red veins. Just when I was under crushing pressure, beginning to doubt whether I could pull off that arrogant, dowry promise, within 3 years, the office door was pushed open. Eloan walked in wearing a sharp black trench coat, carrying a thermal lunchbox, bringing in the coolness of early autumn with her. Everyone out, I'm giving you 12 hours off, go home, shower, and sleep. The moment Eloan entered, she used an undisputable, queenly tone to kick my whole team out of the office. The brothers in R&D acted as if they'd been pardoned, each of them slipped away with winks and nudges, thoughtfully making sure to shut the main door behind them. Eloan, what are you doing here? I rubbed my temples, a little exhausted. I was about to stand when she pressed me back into the chair. Eloan came around behind me, her fair, soft hands landed on my stiff shoulders and began to knead them just right. The Queen of Commerce personally giving you a massage, Chairman, are you satisfied with this service? She whispered in my ear. Flattered and overwhelmed, feeling like the company's stock could hit its upper limit at any moment. I closed my eyes, savoring this rare tenderness as my taut nerves finally relaxed. I've already looked into that company's background, a textbook defensive malicious lawsuit. Eloan pressed her hands into my shoulders while calmly issuing tactical orders. I've had Song's legal team formally step in and file a counter-report accusing them of industry monopoly. Also, Song's venture fund will make an additional strategic investment of $20 million tomorrow. Jasper, you don't need to be polite with me about marketplace rules, you're one of my investments, and I won't let anyone make a scene in my territory. I opened my eyes, turned and grabbed her hand, my chest burning. Eloan, thank you. Thank what? Eloan arched an eyebrow, teasing me on purpose. Don't forget, this investment comes with high interest. If there isn't a single cent less in the betrothal gift after 3 years, I'll pack you up and sell you to an African mining company to write code. Don't worry, I'll guarantee quality and quantity, both you and the company will be yours. I grinned and pulled her into my arms. Outside the window, a city's neon lights glittered. The business world rose and fell, but as long as I could smell that sprig of gardenia against my chest, I felt I had the courage to take on the whole world. Time is the most faithful chronicler in this world. 3 years passed in the clatter of code typed through countless all-nighters and in endless sharp-tongued business negotiations, slipping by like a fleeting horse. My Sky-Eye Vision Technologies has not let anyone down. In the first year, our chips went into mass production, breaking the foreign monopoly. In the second year, we successfully listed on the Science and Technology Innovation Board, and the market value rocketed. In the third year, as our autonomous driving algorithms became the industry standard setter, the company's valuation successfully surpassed the 10 billion mark. I, Jasper, the orphan from a welfare home who couldn't even afford a few thousand yuan in tuition back then, have now become the country's youngest tech magnate, worth billions. The media called me the breaker of the era, but only I knew that the source of it all was nothing more than a ticket handed to me to change my fate one summer when I was 18 by a woman who seemed like a deity. The last day of a 3-year pact. City A, the Ritz-Carlton's top banquet hall. A century-defining wedding that has shaken the entire business world is taking place here. The venue was decorated in a dreamlike blend of starry skies and flowing code. Countless tech magnates and business tycoons had gathered. And today's protagonists were Eloan and me. I wore a neat, all-black suit and stood at the end of the red carpet, my palms unexpectedly slick with sweat. I didn't feel nervous at the international finals back then, nor when the company rang the bell for its IPO, but now my heart feels like it's about to leap out of my chest. As the banquet hall doors slowly opened, the wedding march thundered to life. Eloane wore a pure white couture wedding gown and, accompanied by her father, walked toward me at a measured pace. Tiny diamonds were set into the dress, and under the lights they shimmered like the star-filled sky we once watched together in the villa garden. She wore no veil. Those clear, proud eyes, now brimming with tears of joy, locked onto me just as they had back then in the leaky reception room of the orphanage. When her father placed her hand in mine, he patted my shoulder and said softly, "You rascal, in 3 years' time you really did it. From now on, Eloane is in your care." "Don't worry, Dad." I nodded solemnly. I held Eloane's familiar little hand. 3 years ago she was my benefactor, my queen. Over the past 3 years she was my comrade in arms, my lover, and today she would become my wife for life. Before exchanging rings, the officiant smiled and handed the microphone to me. "Mr. Jasper, on this joyful day, do you have anything you'd like to say to your bride?" The entire hall fell silent in an instant, every gaze turned to us. I took the microphone and looked at Eloane before me, clad in a pristine wedding gown, unbearably beautiful, and my throat suddenly tightened. For years of secret longing, 3 years of striving, countless days and nights of waiting, all of it surged through me like an overwhelming tide, making the rims of my eyes burn faintly. I squeezed Eloane's hand, drew a deep breath, and, my voice a little hoarse yet utterly clear, spoke so that it rang through the whole hall. Many people told me, "Jasper, you are a genius." But at 18 I was just an orphan who couldn't even afford tuition, who didn't dare to hope for a future. In that summer when poverty burned me with nowhere to hide, I had even prepared to bow to fate. It was Eloane who appeared in that leaky welfare home, reached out her finger, and pulled me back from the swamp of despair. I paused, gazing at her with deep affection, my eyes so tender they seemed about to spill tears. At the time, she said it was an investment. Later, she met with an accident, and in the hospital, in the darkest moment when everyone was calculating against her and betraying her, she reached back and gripped my hand with everything she had. She didn't actually know that, as early as 4 years ago, she had already become my deity. I hid my love because I knew the man I was then didn't deserve her. But I promised I would be her eyes, that I would watch over her for a lifetime. Some of the female guests in the audience had already begun bowing their heads to wipe away tears. Eloane's eyes also brimmed with crystalline moisture. "These past 3 years, I've run forward like a madman. I founded a company, I fought to achieve results, not to prove to the world how great I am, but so that today I could stand before you with confidence and dignity, so I could bring you home as my wife in a glorious way, and so no one would ever belittle you again. Eloane, thank you for your kindness back then, and thank you for your courage since. From today on, you no longer have to be that invincible business powerhouse. You used to shield me, for the rest of our lives, let me shelter you from wind and rain. This life of mine, in this life and every life to come, belongs only to you." In the audience, Eloane's parents watched the scene. Her mother had long since been moved to tears, dabbing them steadily with a handkerchief, while her father's eyes were red and he nodded repeatedly with quiet satisfaction. Eloane stood opposite me, tears finally spilling over and sliding down her pale cheeks. She didn't wipe them away. Those eyes, even more captivating than before, were fixed on me, while the corners of her mouth wore an indescribably happy smile. "Jasper, you idiot," she murmured in a voice meant only for the two of us, tinged with a sob and her usual playful reproach. The officiant, touched by the sincere confession, sounded a little moved. What a reciprocated vow of devotion. "Now, bride and groom, please exchange the tokens of your lifetime together." With the sacred, lilting wedding march playing, the page carrying the tray stepped up to the altar. I trembled slightly as I picked up the carefully chosen diamond ring, and gingerly lifted Eloane's fair, delicate hand. "Eloane, once you put this on, there's no returning it for the rest of your life." I pushed the ring onto her ring finger with a mischievous smile, trying to disguise the tears already threatening to spill from the corners of my eyes. In the Song Corporation's dictionary, there is no such thing as returns, only additional investment. Eloane wiped her tears into a smile, took the other man's wedding band, and without hesitation slipped it onto my hand. 2 rings glinted under the dazzling spotlights, reflecting a blinding light, like the darkness we once walked through together that has at last been transformed into a brilliance to illuminate the rest of our lives. "Groom, you may now kiss your bride," the officiant's voice rang out, full of fervor. At that moment the applause reached its peak, accompanied by the guests' cheers and catcalls. It seemed almost capable of lifting the banquet hall's roof. I reached out, a little impatient yet treasuring the moment, and slowly drew aside the white veil before Eloan. That face that once haunted my dreams and seemed impossibly out of reach now lay completely unguarded before me, a charming flush of shyness staining her cheeks. I slid my arm around her slender waist and, amid a whirlwind of golden streamers and rose petals, fiercely kissed the pair of lips I would gladly spend my life protecting. This kiss no longer bore the restraint and suppression of those years, nor the tentative, cat-and-mouse ambiguity of 3 years ago in the villa. It was ardent, resolute, carrying the settled certainty of dust having settled and the boundless hope for the long years to come. The orphan of those days had, under the mercy of the divine, at last grown into a towering tree worthy to stand beside the gods. "Eloan, thank you." In the silence between notes, I pressed close to her ear and, in a voice only we could hear, whispered softly. Eloan melted against my chest, listening to the thunderous heartbeat in my ribs that beat wholeheartedly for her alone, and smiled in contentment. Down in the audience, the applause rose like a tide, unending for a long while.